Gem, what would be the appropriate thing to say in this situation? Eins Ulgaunt said with the most regal bearing he could muster. After the NPCs finally returned to their respective tasks after the tournament matches, Eins found himself with little to do. Suzuki Satoru would have retired to his home to immerse himself in the world of Yggdrasil before collapsing into his bed for a few hours of sleep. That life was no more, however. Perhaps one could say that he was living the life. Or, rather, the unlife. This, of course, came with its pitfalls. For one, he couldn't sleep for 3 hours a day like he used to, thus he had 3 extra hours per day to burn. Combined with the time he once put into work in Yggdrasil, basically his entire schedule, he had a lot of time to kill. Habits drilled into Suzuki Satoru compelled him to find something to do. Paperwork or connecting with clients or something, except as the Sorcerer King, he had very little on that front awaiting his attention. These days, Albedo performed most of the executive functions and the only bits of administrative work that reached him were finalized proposals that required his seal of approval. What else was a king to do? He wasn't sure. Spying on Emperor Jerkniv only made him painfully aware of the idea that he should be doing more than acting kingly, but any anonymous proposals that he made were slapped down by Albedo with the utmost disdain. And, so, he made do with looking busy. His shroud had led him away from the arena and across the 6th floor on an inspection, which ultimately led to him staring up at Baroness Saradnik, who was hanging upside down from a tree. As expected of Ein Summer, Aura exclaimed from nearby, "You know exactly what's going on." What do you think, Ein Summer? Mare asked. That much should be obvious, Eins answered. But first, shouldn't we let her down? Aura flicked a knife at the Baroness, severing the vine wrapped around one of her ankles. The young noblewoman flipped over in midair and landed on her feet, untangled her skirts, and fled deeper into the forest. Eh? Does she have something else to do? Eins asked. I guess she went to look for the next resource node, Mare said. I guess they're seeing what she's capable of gathering. At least that's something that I can understand. They ran similar experiments when the first set of natives moved into Nazarick. With the way that Yggdrasil's shitty devs had designed the procurement of resources, it had led to some traumatic experiences among the test subjects. Failure to pass harvesting skill checks led to the node being wasted, a trap being triggered, or some combination of the two. Of course, there was no way to retaliate against a resource node. Back in the early days of Yggdrasil, he had tried his hand at mining in a desperate attempt to work up the funds to buy new equipment. His very first try resulted in a cave-in that killed him, so he gave up on the idea. What has she been able to gather? Eins asked. She's been able to successfully do third-tier foraging nodes about half of the time so far, Ein Summer, Mare replied. That should pin her as a level 7 or 8 ranger? Since she's missing some core ranger abilities, we're trying to narrow down her job classes. Though the natives were all relatively low level, the prospect of discovering new classes, magic, and items always excited him. However, the realities of realizing the potential of the dwarf runesmiths had him on the lookout for more useful things he could add to the Sorcerous Kingdom's industrial power. Otherwise, he would feel like no progress was being made. Speaking of which, he said, how is your progress regarding farming advanced crops? I'm sorry, Ein Summer, Mare's ears drooped. We haven't been able to reconcile the two systems yet. Eins rested a hand lightly on Mare's head. Ma, I never expected it to be easy. We have plenty of time to figure things out. Aura, track down the Baroness for us. Got it. Not long after founding the Sorcerous Kingdom, Eins's hopes of being able to cultivate crops of Yggdrasil plants were unceremoniously squashed by reality. In this case, it was literally reality, as the production methods of their new world were alien to those of Yggdrasil and more akin to what one might find on the Earth of the distant past. In the game, one gathered materials from nodes that respawned at a loosely fixed rate. Even things like grain were collected in this manner, yielding a small stack of items that went into one's inventory. Those items, in turn, would be used in one recipe or another. Those recipes would yield a consumable, which usually granted some bonuses. The native production system, however, was realistic. One didn't usually harvest grain from a node using the gathering abilities available to job classes such as Alchemist, Druid, or Ranger. Instead, One used a scythe or some other tool and got to work mowing down an entire field of grain. Instead of getting a small stack of materials, wagons would be filled to deliver to a storage facility. While a whole new production job class had arisen as a result of this activity, which was colloquially known as the farmer. Anyone could try their hand at reaping the fields without the fields exploding or swallowing them whole. By the same token, the small stack of materials harvested from a resource node in Yggdrasil couldn't feed people the way that a farm did. A field the size of the 6th floor using the Sorceress Kingdom's agricultural techniques could feed a small city. Between the 4th and 6th floors, the Nazarick only produced enough food to sustain less than 100 permanent base NPCs. Experiments early into the formation of the Sorceress Kingdom revealed two critical issues with growing Yggdrasil plants in the New World. The first was that the local farmers didn't possess levels high enough to harvest most of what Nazarick had to offer. Enri Mott, who presumably had at least one level N farmer, had demonstrated the ability to identify and gather low-level herbs in the Great Forest of Tob, but she couldn't harvest anything higher when they brought her to the 6th floor on her tour around Nazarick. The second issue was that, while a plant from Yggdrasil might be able to survive in the outside world, it couldn't be mass-cultivated as the local crops could. Indeed, even efforts to grow native alchemical herbs in a garden led to inferior products. Some subtle efforts had been made to chase rumors of superior crops abroad, but, so far, it was a puzzle with no solution in sight. "She's over here," Aura called. Ainz made his way around several huge tree trunks to arrive at a small clearing in the forest. A snort escaped him when they found Lady Zaradnik's rear sticking out of a purple flower blossom. Two of Aura's pets, who laired in the same clearing, sniffed at the stranger curiously. "Blue Planet Sun got stuck in one of these things once," Ainz said. He did?" Mare's eyes went wide. "He did," Ainz nodded. "Someone stuck this one here to remind him of that time, but why would Zaradnik Dono try to harvest a 6th-tier plant?" "I don't think she can tell exactly what tier it is," Aura said. "So far, it seems that she can sense if a high-tier plant is dangerous, but not how dangerous. She can tell whether it's useful, as well. Still, she probably wouldn't have tried harvesting it if we hadn't asked her to go around trying." "I see." They stared at the butt sticking out at them. Aura cleared her throat. "Should we pull her out?" she asked. "Can we pull her out?" Mare asked back. "If I recall correctly," Ainz said, "this one digests anything it swallows with acid. I believe she's immune to acid, so. Was she stuck in the flower for all eternity? Maybe there was a timer. We could try harvesting the plant." Aura equipped a dagger and approached the node. She separated the blossom from its stem in a smooth, practiced motion. The huge flower unceremoniously fell to the leaf litter below. "Is she a material now?" Mare asked. "It doesn't work that way," Ainz said, "probably." In response, Lady Zaradnik righted herself and rose to her feet. The flower was still clamped over her upper body and her attempts to shake it off seemed futile. "Hold on," Aura said, "I'll try and get it off." Aura led Lady Zaradnik to a low-hanging branch nearby. The dark elf hopped onto the branch, reaching down to tug on the severed stem of the flower. The young noblewoman was lifted off at the ground along with it. After some violent shaking, she finally fell out, covered in a layer of slime. "Ew," Aura made a face. At least it doesn't smell bad," Mare offered. The Baroness got onto her hands and knees and crawled into the nearest bush. "Hey," Aura said, "is that any way to act in front of Ainsummer? Just kill me." "I heard that you were performing some experiments," Ainz said. "I hope you don't mind my joining in." "Your Majesty may do whatever he wishes," the bush replied. Aura took a stick and poked the bush. Ainz turned to Mare. "How far have you gotten?" he asked. "We just started, Ainsummer," Mare answered, then pulled out a notebook. As Ainsummer says, she has the foraging capability of a level 7 or 8 ranger. We also think she doesn't have access to the favored enemy system. She has a pet, so she should have access to the bonding system. She also has tracking, pass without trace, and, based on her activity in the Adventurer Guild, she's chosen the two-handed weapon combat style. That's pretty rare. Not that we couldn't figure that out before. In Yggdrasil, the most popular combat style for rangers was bow, followed by dual-wielding. Mounted combat came in at a distant third. "What else is she missing?" Ainz asked. Well, endurance is worthless for the undead, Mare said. Maybe she threw that away. Did that make any sense? Even in Yggdrasil, one couldn't throw away something that was baked into a job class. On the other hand, if she was getting all of her ranger perks from racial class levels, then it made perfect sense. His levels in Skeleton Mage traded a handful of wizard perks for undead ones. Losing access to the favored enemy system is pretty huge, Ainz said. It's basically a ranger's calling card. If I understand it correctly, most of the rangers in the region base their livelihoods off of it. They had done some extensive testing back during their exploration of the Katza Plains, but he only vaguely remembered the parts where they tested her capabilities as a captain. Yes, Your Majesty, the bush said. Most foresters are specialized in beasts or plants, depending on their specific occupation. I believe that rangers in the local town and city militias specialize in humans. I haven't focused my efforts on being a ranger, however. I swear I've been doing what I can to grow as a captain, Your Majesty. Ainz frowned at the note of desperation in the bush's voice. Lady Zaradnik knew about the class system, so it stood to reason that she didn't want to contaminate her build. At the same time, for someone who could just die and get up again on their own, it shouldn't have been more than an annoyance. Unless the unwanted levels are buried under everything else. That would be a huge pain in the ass. I believe we hypothesized that your revenant levels at least in part follow a ranger archetype, Ainz said. This should be easy enough to prove, since most heteromorphs enjoy huge stat advantages over demi-humans and humanoids. How has Zaradnik Dono been doing in the Adventurer Guild? She hasn't undergone an assessment for a long time, Mare said. That was back when we only used tests in the Adventurer training area, and she qualified for Mithril. There's no way she's Mithril. Aura laughed. She spars against Death Knights every day and wins, you know? Our Mithril ranks can't do that. She can beat Death Knights? Ainz peered at the bush. What about the other types? The Death Warriors can best me if they can stay on the offensive, the bush replied. I can win against the Death Knights because I can outlast them. The equipment that I've been so graciously granted plays a major role, of course. So her defenses and regeneration allow her to win in a battle of attrition against a Death Knight, but a Death Warrior can still burst her down. I guess that makes sense. If they were in Yggdrasil, he would have said she was at least a level 30 warrior type with strong sustain. Their new world, however, contained too many alien mechanics and other unknowns for him to make a confident prediction. In that case, Ainz said, how about we make that assessment now? We'll be able to keep things private if we do it here. Right away, Ainz Summer. Mare started withdrawing various items out of his inventory, starting with a stack of binders. Logs of various sizes came after that, followed by some charts and posters. He opened the first of the binders and flipped through its pages until he arrived at one with a large table. First will be carrying capacity, he said. Find the heaviest log you can lift and move around with. With a rustle of leaves, Lady Zaradnik appeared from the bush. She had somehow cleaned herself up and fixed her appearance while hidden. After walking slowly along the row of logs, she stopped at one marked 1 ton and lifted it off of the ground. A moment later, she set it down again. Too heavy? Rather than look for a lighter burden, she went over and picked up a much larger log marked 4 tons. She wandered around with it a bit, teetering back and forth as she did. It would be much easier to move if there was a better way to carry this thing, the Baroness said. Is that the most you can do? Mare asked. It's about the most I'd be able to manage while traveling long distances, my lord. Assuming the route has suitable clearance. Mare frowned as he scanned the table in the binder. Ainz leaned in to see what he was looking at. Is there a problem? He asked. I'm trying to guess how her heteromorph levels figure into our statistics, Mare answered. What do you think, Ainz Summer? Ainz scanned the rows and columns of the table. Aside from 2 or 3 people, the Adventurer Guild's membership was human. According to Mare's numbers, Mithril rank fighters could carry between 500 kilograms and a ton. There was also an Orichalcum rank ranger and paladin, but neither could do better than half of what Lady Zaradnik was capable of. How did it work again? The average heteromorph has triple the physical capabilities of the average humanoid. If we assume that she has 8 levels in Revenant, does that account for the difference in strength? We need other points of data. She doesn't wear out, Aura said. Ainz and Mare looked up at Aura, who had gone to sit on the branch from before. She doesn't get tired, right? Aura said, that means she can go full power all the time. MMH. Mare looked back down at the table, so if we assume that her carrying capacity is the same as everyone else's maximum lifting capability, it doesn't seem as crazy. How about determining her total levels? Ainz asked. That would likely make our guesswork much easier. Her danger sense is subjective, though, Aura said. It tells her how strong something is relative to herself, not its actual levels. Have you tried teaching her how to con targets? I hadn't thought about doing that. Is it possible? I beg your pardon, Your Majesty, Lady Zaradnik said, but I'm not familiar with that term. Ah, crap. I used MMO terminology, didn't I? Due to their everyday interactions with the NPCs, game-related terminology proliferated between members of the Adventurer Guild before he knew it. Lady Zaradnik was often busy performing her duties in other roles, however, so she might not have picked up the vocabulary to the same extent. It's not exactly a proper term, Ainz said. I suppose you could say it's slang. Con is short for consider, which is an ancient technique to determine the level of a target relative to one's own. In Aura's case, the skill that cons a target displays its relative level in different colors, with each color representing 5% of the skill user's level. That's right, Aura nodded. As an example, the colors go from dark blue to light blue to dark green as they get lower relative to even, which is within 5 levels of me. If a target is dark green, they have a 3-color difference, meaning they're somewhere between level 85 and 80. Does that mean my lady is level 100? Yup. Ainz cleared his throat. Aura's version of the skill is a higher level one that will reveal additional information about the target, but low-level ranges should have a basic version. Strangely, that doesn't seem to be the case. Instead, a much more vague danger sense is in common use. It may be that the skill existed at one point, Your Majesty, Lady Zaradnik set down the log. But, if I were to guess, it fell out of use for the same reason that our adventurers favor using difficulty ratings. Without a thorough knowledge of class levels, danger sense and difficulty ratings are infinitely more practical. The strength of demi-humans and heteromorphs relative to humanoids is a good case for this. Knowing that someone is a level 1 beastman means very little to those who do not know what that entails, but stating that the level 1 beastman is difficulty rating 30 puts their strength on an understandable scale. As someone who has gained a sense of levels and their implications, however, I wouldn't mind learning this skill. The Baroness looked up at Aura. Aura scratched her head. It's, you activate the skill and it's like bibi bitching. Then you get the info. I see, Lady Zaradnik said. You do? Ainz said. He took a step back as the young noblewoman's gaze went to him. What is it? Is there a manual for this skill, Your Majesty? That is a very good question, he said. The library may have some useful information, or maybe it's stored away in the treasury? It wasn't the way that players learned new spells, skills, and abilities, so one could say that he was fishing for answers. At the same time, it could very well be that the answers actually existed. The books and items in the Great Library of Ashurbanipal and the Guild Treasury had all become real articles, so a race or class promotion item might hold the relevant information. He hadn't done much checking himself because he was afraid that a certain bearded maniac would ambush him. Our resources are vast, Ainz said, so it may take you a while to find anything related to what you're looking for. I'm sure the library staff will be more than happy to assist you, however, with all due respect, Lady Zaradnik looked down at the log in front of her. I feel that Your Majesty is being far too generous. Someone of my humble station doesn't deserve such consideration. Ainz held in a sigh. It would have been far easier to deal with the Baroness if she was greedy. If that were the case, he could have treated everything as strictly give and take, and he had no qualms about disposing of self-serving individuals if need be. Instead, Lady Zaradnik was like a character from a fantasy story or bygone era, who prioritized long-term relationships built on trust, reciprocity, and a strict sense of hierarchy that defined one's rights and privileges. Not that it's undesirable. Broadly speaking, Ainz considered her a good influence on the children of his friends. The very behavior that made her difficult to deal with served as a desirable example that he had no wish to change. In his world, there were his friends and those associated with them, and then there was everyone else. He wanted those on the inside to share the closely knit bonds that he once had with the members of Ainz Ulgan. Out of curiosity, Ainz said, "Do you plan on betraying the Sorceress Kingdom at some point in the future?" The atmosphere around them suddenly changed. Aura stood up on her branch while Maya stepped in front of Ainz. Lady Zaradnik immediately went to a knee before him. "Why, Your Majesty," she said, "the thought has never crossed my mind. What must I do to?" "Then I see no problem with it," Ainz told her. "You may not consider it in these terms, but you are an asset with proven value to the Sorcerer's Kingdom. Furthermore, do you not think that the Sorcerer's Kingdom will benefit from any discoveries that you make? Many of our citizens may have gotten on board with the idea of a peaceful and prosperous nation, but you of all people should understand what is required to keep it that way." "Yes, Your Majesty. Understand that I don't disapprove of your sense of propriety, but the way that you frame things can be rather self-centered in a strange way. Going around thinking by default that you don't deserve one thing or another will eventually see you taken advantage of, or worse." "To be honest," Lady Zaradnik said, "it has already happened on multiple occasions. Then why haven't you changed according to those experiences?" "I don't know, Your Majesty. My friends would say that it's because I'm a stubborn frontier noble." This woman is just as bad as the NPCs in some ways. Just like the denizens of Nazarick stubbornly insisted on remaining in the same state that their creators had left them in, the Baroness stubbornly insisted on remaining true to her rigid values. It wasn't so hard to believe that this was a major reason why she got along so well with the NPCs. "That's not necessarily an undesirable quality," Ainz said, "but you should always strive to improve what can be improved, no?" "Of course. By Your Majesty's will." He felt that he should say something about her fervent response, but Aura and Mir seemed pleased for some reason. "Let's continue with our testing, shall we?" Ainz said, "I'm curious as to what our findings will be." They continued through the battery of tests that had recently been developed for the Adventurer Guild. The tests covered several areas that helped to pinpoint key traits of the class archetypes that they knew of. With Baroness Zaradnik, however, the results seemed to lead to as many questions as answers. "Her sensory abilities are significantly above what a level 7 or 8 ranger should have," Maya said. "Where is the difference coming from?" "A piece of equipment, perhaps?" Ainz suggested. "My civilian garb is wholly defensive in nature," Lady Zaradnik said. "I removed any accessories that might influence the results." "So she has a non-ranger class with enhanced sensory abilities?" Aura crossed her arms. "Bard or rogue, maybe?" "I haven't done anything bard or roguish in my recollection, my lady." "Maybe it's from the type of commander she is," Ainz suggested. "Conventional commanders don't have enhanced powers of observation, but a captain that is supposed to operate in the thick of battle might. Do you know of anything that might suggest this, Zaradnik Dono?" "My heritage has always mixed our role as frontier nobles with that of being rangers, Your Majesty," Lady Zaradnik replied. "I can't say whether that means it is a job class in itself." Ainz brought up a hand to stroke his chin in thought. How troublesome. Most members of the Adventurer Guild had straightforward assessments due to their singular focus on filling one role or the other in a party. One already knew what to expect before an evaluation, and those expectations tended to be in line with their findings. While the Baroness undeniably had some powerful prestige classes in her build, trying to untangle the web that it created was an arduous task. "How about we approach this from a different angle?" Ainz said. "What is your capacity for martial arts, Zaradnik Dono?" 5 focus levels without resorting to limit break or sacrificing health, the Baroness replied. "So at least 25 warrior archetype job class levels or their equivalent. That on its own would qualify you for orichalcum." On a whim, Ainz used Summon Undead V to create a weep. The black bile leaking out of its orifices and saws hissed and sent up wisps of rancid gas as they dripped onto the leaves. "Out of curiosity," he said, "what does your danger sense say about this summon?" "It's stronger than I am," Lady Zaradnik said, "but I can defeat it." Ainz considered her immediate response. It wasn't something that one would normally hear. After factoring in his build's bonuses to undead summons, the level 30 weep could come away even against a non-specialized caster's level 34 summon. "How did you come to that conclusion?" he asked. "I've deployed weeps in battle before," Lady Zaradnik answered. "Their advantage comes in the form of damage reduction, regeneration, and the deadly bile that they emit, which makes them excellent vanguard troops. I am immune to the bile and my weapon has a high enough enchantment level that it bypasses their damage reduction. It would be something like fighting a super zombie for me. Indeed, Ainz nodded in agreement. You're quick to make accurate assessments of your odds in combat. I would wager that most powerful warriors would tell people that the summon was weaker than them if they were in your shoes. Regular adventurers or mercenaries probably would since it affects their business, the Baroness said, but I see no point in doing so. Humph. In that case. He dismissed the weep and summoned a greater white with summon undead 4. This one is much closer to my strength, Your Majesty, Lady Zaradnik reported. Is it stronger, or weaker? It feels about equal. Does that mean she's level 26? It was a nifty way to determine one's level, at best. I am assuming here that these warrior-type summons follow roughly the same power curve as an undead warrior like yourself, he said. If that's the case, it means that you are roughly level 26. That being said, the power of heteromorphs at lower levels is such that you could claim to be in the realm of heroes and no one would be able to disprove the statement. Should we issue her a second-class adamantite tag, Einsummer? Mayor asked. The Baroness shifted on her feet with an uneasy expression. Ainz chuckled at yet another display of her austere nature. If she desires it, he said, it would be best to go through official procedures. Momen drew quite a bit of fire from the other adventurers back when he skipped his way up to adamantite, and I can't guarantee that it wouldn't happen here. Emotions can make even the most civil individuals irrational, after all. Now, how about a change of scenery? We should get you familiar with the rest of Nazarick. When Ludmilla stepped out of the teleportation gate, she found herself in a brightly lit foyer. Muted grey stone formed the floors and the walls followed a pastel scheme emphasizing cream, lavender, and pink. Crystal chandeliers of incalculable worth illuminated the corridors leading out from the foyer, and a grand staircase dominated the way directly in front of them. A familiar figure in a maid uniform stirred from her place along a wall nearby. The maid's eyes widened slightly as they crossed over Ludmilla before her expression returned to a mask of unflappable composure. Lord Ainz, Miss Alpha lowered her head as she curtsied before the Sorcerer King. Welcome back. I'm back, the Sorcerer King replied. As you can see, I've brought a guest along with us. This is Baroness Ludmilla Zaradnik, one of the nobles ruling the southern territories of the Sorceress Kingdom. She and I are well acquainted. Miss Alpha rose from her greeting. It is a surprise to see you here, Baroness Zaradnik, but a pleasure nonetheless. Shall we have a room prepared for our guest, Lord Ainz? Yes, I was thinking of just that, the Sorcerer King nodded. She should properly situate herself before we continue with our business. Ludmilla exchanged a look with Lady Aura and Lord Mayor. I thought she was staying with us, Lord Mayor said. She set up a tent and everything. A tent, you say? Miss Alpha coolly adjusted her glasses. The intimidating gesture squashed the twins' nascent objections. Ludmilla couldn't say anything, as it was undeniably improper for royalty to have a guest sleep outside. Will it be difficult to traverse floors? Ludmilla asked. I'd like to continue spectating the tournament matches, and I believe that I still have some things to see on the 6th floor. The teleportation gate on this floor is set to send travelers to the 6th floor by default over the course of the tournament, my lady, Miss Alpha said. You will have no issues going back and forth. Lord Ainz, shall I give Lady Zaradnik a tour of the area while her room is prepared? I intended to do it myself, the Sorcerer King replied. You may attend to us while we do so. The maid nodded in acknowledgement before falling into line behind them. The Sorcerer King's crimson gaze went between the corridors branching from the foyer. Now, where should we start? The canteen is nearby. Vutar, didn't you have some business with the head chef? Yes, Your Majesty, Ludmilla replied. Would he be available to receive us at this hour? I'm sure he's in the kitchen right now. The opening day of the tournament should have given him much to contemplate. Doesn't that mean he's busy? She followed the Sorcerer King as he made his way down the corridor to the right of the foyer entrance. It wasn't long before countless exotic aromas filled the air. Ahead of them, the corridor opened up into some sort of hall, but Ludmilla's gaze was drawn by a pair of doors along the way. What do those signs mean? She asked. Those are the washrooms for this wing, the Sorcerer King replied. The sign with the figure in the dress indicates the one for women. In hindsight, she supposed that it was fairly clear what the signs meant. Don't some races have more than 2 sexes? Ludmilla said. How does it work for them? The Sorcerer King stopped in his tracks. Ludmilla shifted uncomfortably. Maybe it was a foolish question generated by her human-centric upbringing. Neuronist goes into the women's washroom, Lady Aura said, and sous-chef. Actually, does sous-chef even go to the washroom? He's a myconid, Lord Mayor said, so probably not. Huh? Well, neither of them are from races that have sexes. Neuronist just goes into the washroom that she feels that she should go into. Out of curiosity, Ludmilla asked, what race is she? There are so many here that I've never seen or heard of before. She's a brain eater. They don't have sexes because they reproduce by implanting a tadpole from a spawning pool into people's brains. Cool, huh? Miss Alpha's face turned a sickly hue. Or maybe it was a normal hue. She was supposedly a type of zombie, after all. Has she reproduced before? Ludmilla asked. Nah, Aura said. Nazareth doesn't have any elder brains or spawning pools. How would facilitating a race like that even work from a legal perspective? Most living things were driven to reproduce, but reproducing in a brain-eater's case meant parasitizing someone else. Normally, that would be considered murder, but outlawing a race from reproducing was an inevitable death sentence for an entire species even if they were heteromorphs. Biological immortality and resurrection magic only kept death at bay. It didn't guarantee that something couldn't go terribly wrong in the long span of eternity. The Sorcerer King raised a hand to this temple. Everyone looked at him expectantly, and, after a moment, he turned to address them. You'll have to excuse me, he said. Albedo has something to discuss with me. I'll rejoin you when we're done. A sense of disappointment fell over Ludmilla as she watched the Sorcerer King's majestic figure go back down the way they had come. It had taken all day for her to come to grips with the fact that she might be around him. Now that she was starting to enjoy his company, he was gone. Lady Aura and Lord Mayor similarly bore crestfallen looks. She did it on purpose, Lady Aura grumbled. Miss Alpha cleared her throat. If you would please follow me, she said. The corridor brought them to a long hall where rows of tables lined with simple chairs awaited use by their patrons. On the far end of the hall was a counter of unfamiliar construction bearing a variety of foods under rows of metallic magical lightning. They made their way past the tables toward the counter. Ludmilla eyed the trays of food on offer as they approached. I've never seen anything like this before, she said. I believe some of the dishes should be familiar to you, my lady, Miss Alpha said. The bread and sausages, for instance. What I meant was this, presentation? The magic items in use here are all unknown to me. Magic items, rather than magic items, you could see them as technology. Weren't magic items a form of technology? She would have to investigate the distinction at a later date. This system of serving food is known as a buffet, Miss Alpha continued as they walked up to the counter. The canteen is designed to service the entire staff, offering fresh meals around the clock. It's normally a busy place, but everyone's been indulging themselves at the tournament festival. Though she said so, the trays embedded into the counter were heaped with dozens of different types of food. As Miss Alpha mentioned, there were many familiar-looking dishes, some of which might be considered common fare, but the presentation gave everything a luxurious feel. The only part about the buffet that threw things off was the manservant wearing a skin-tight mask covering his entire head. He had appeared to stare across the counter at her at some point. A footman? But why is he wearing a mask? He had a humanoid appearance and was wearing some sort of uniform, but she couldn't be sure what race he was with the mask on. Then again, she had mistaken the homunculus maids for humans, so being able to see the man's face might not help at all. The counter along the wall to your right is the salad bar, Miss Alpha said. The drink fountain's over there, Lady Aura said. There's an ice cream machine, too, Lord Mayor added. They spoke as if everything was self-explanatory, but Ludmilla struggled to make sense of what everything was. She supposed that the salad bar did look like a bar with assorted vegetables on it, but the fountain didn't in any way resemble a fountain. If anything, it looked similar to the ice cream machine, which in turn looked like it belonged in one of Leanne's machining workshops. How do they work? Ludmilla asked. I'll go and see if the head chef is available, Miss Alpha said. Lord Mayor and Lady Aura can show you how the facilities operate. The maid disappeared into a set of metal double doors. The twins' feet patted over the pink parquet as they led her to the aforementioned facilities. Lady Aura pointed to what appeared to be the bottom of a cup sticking out of a metal cylinder. "Take a cup," Lady Aura told her. Ludmilla reached out and gingerly gripped the bottom of the cup. It popped out with a bit of effort, revealing the bottom of another cup. "Is it magic, my lady?" Ludmilla asked. "It's just a cup dispenser," Lady Aura said. "It's not magic." Ludmilla examined the cup. It was made out of an unknown, lightweight material that gave way under her fingers with a bit of a squeeze. To her surprise, the material returned to its original form as she lightened her grip. On a whim, she dropped the vessel. It hit the ground with a clatter and rolled to a stop against her boot. She picked it up to check for signs of damage. "This is an amazing piece of work," she said as she marveled at the item. "Would it be possible to introduce me to the artisan?" The twins exchanged a look. Lord Mayor fidgeted with his staff. "It's magic," he said in a very small voice. But Lady Aura said, "It's magic." Lady Aura said. Ludmilla looked back down at the cup in her hand. Which was it? Maybe she meant that the dispenser was mundane, but the cups were magic. Still, that should mean this magic item has an artisan, shouldn't it? "Stick the cup on the platform under one of the nozzles there," Lady Aura pointed at the fountain. "Your drink will come out when you press the thingy in the back." Before her were the ends of a half-dozen downward-facing pipes. Above them were some colorful labels, but she couldn't discern what they indicated. She took a moment to steel herself before placing the cup under one of the pipes and pressing the thingy beside it. She snatched her hand back as a jet of sizzling green liquid shot out to soak her skin. "It's a good thing I'm immune to acid," Ludmilla said. Lady Aura and Lord Mayor stared up at her. Was it that surprising? It shouldn't have been, as the Sorcerer King mentioned it during their testing not an hour previous. Was that not acid? Ludmilla asked. "I mean, it's acidic," Lady Aura said, "but it's not acid. Actually, I think it is, big sis." Lord Mayor ducked behind Ludmilla as his sister scowled at his response. "My point is that you're not going to kill anyone by spraying them with melon soda." Ludmilla wiped the sticky fluid off of her hand with a handkerchief. It must have been a drink for some species of demi-human or heteromorph. Humans didn't drink acid, after all. The device seemed to require training in multiracial conventions to operate without getting injured. Lady Aura took Ludmilla's cup and pressed it against the thingy behind it. Brown liquid filled the vessel. She attached some sort of lid to the cup and poked a long, striped object into it. "Here," Lady Aura held out the cup to her. "Thank you, my lady." Ludmilla lowered her head as she received her drink. "If I may ask, what is this?" "It's iced tea." "Is this a straw, my lady?" "Yup." It appeared to be made of the same material as the cup and its lid, and there was no sign of either softening from the drink. She wondered whether it was cheaper to produce than the silver and gold straws used by the wealthy. "Something wrong?" Lady Aura asked. No, my lady. I was just pondering the applications of this strange material. You mentioned that it was magical. What tier of artisan is required to craft it?" "Who knows?" Lady Aura shrugged. "You should ask Lord Dines when he gets back." Ludmilla took a sip from her drink, nearly coughing at its unexpected sweetness. Lord Mayor went over to the ice cream machine and retrieved a cup that was made out of a different material. "This is an ice cream cone," he said. "It's basically a cracker in the shape of a cup. You stick it under the nozzle here and pull the lever." Actually, maybe I should do it." Was the second device even more dangerous than the first? Perhaps her knowledge of ice cream was woefully inadequate. "What type would you like?" Lord Mayor asked. "Something fruity, if it exists." Lord Mayor stuck the ice cream cone under a nozzle and reached up to pull a lever. He filled the cone with pink ice cream, piling it up in a somewhat unpleasant shape. Here you go. It's strawberry." Ludmilla smiled. "Thank you, my lord." With her iced tea in one hand and strawberry ice cream in the other, Ludmilla moved on to the salad bar. She scanned the foods on display, pondering what wonders awaited her. "This is the salad bar," Lady Aura told her. "Are these all different types of salad, my lady?" "Yup. I like the egg salad with bacon bits." Ludmilla's eyes traced Lady Aura's gesture to the food in question. She couldn't say that she had seen green eggs or bacon before. "I didn't know that there were so many salads, my lady." How does this device work? First, you take the plate from there. Ludmilla set down her cup and reached for a plate. The stack of dishes rose slightly as she did so. Was there levitation magic cast on each one? It was an interesting way to prevent accidental breakage, if so. What next? She asked. Then you grab a pair of tongs over there. All right, and then you use them to put your salad on your plate. She reached out for the green egg salad, then hesitated, turning to look at Lady Aura. What? The dark elf frowned. The salad won't do anything to me, will it? I think you're hoping for too much from some salad. Your ice cream is melting, Lord Mayor said. She sucked the drippings off of Lord Mayor's ice cream cone before turning her attention back to Lady Aura's salad. Even food procurement was a highly challenging activity in Nazarick. They seated themselves at one of the tables to wait for Miss Alpha to return with the head chef. She had to eat the ice cream before starting on the salad and she wasn't sure how to feel about the resulting taste. Our apologies for the wait. Miss Alpha re-emerged from the double doors. The hulking figure of Master Tokitsu filled the space behind her. He was even larger than QRS Ganzu. Miss Yuri says that you have something to discuss with me, he said. But she didn't have any of the details. Ludmilla rose from her seat. Thank you for taking the time to come and speak with me, Master Tokitsu, she said. Please forgive me for requesting this impromptu appointment. To be honest, I've only just broached the topic with His Majesty the Sorcerer King. He said you would be interested. Okay. Across the table from the Bork, Ludmilla, Lady Aura, and Lord Mayor's hair was blown back by the force of his bellow. Ludmilla blinked several times. Okay? When do we start? Wouldn't you like to hear my proposal first, Master Tokitsu? Ludmilla asked. Nonsense. Master Tokitsu answered, if Lord Ines said I'm interested, then I'm interested. What should I pack? I hope I can make things interesting for him. In a way, it felt like a good turn of events. Rather than an imposition, it was an expression of the Sorcerer King's confidence to deliver what was required. It was precisely how a king should be. I'm still in the process of planning things out, Ludmilla said, so this won't interfere with your activities in the tournament. Ultimately, it is a long-term project meant for the development of the culinary arts in the Sorceress Kingdom, but it shouldn't get in the way of your other duties. Sounds good to me. What was your name again? Ah, I beg your pardon, Master Tokitsu. I am Baroness Ludmilla Zarodnik, a vassal of Lady Schultier. The head chef looked down at her with his out-of-alignment gaze, lightly stroking his chin. One of the new area guardians, huh? Well, as your senior, feel free to ask me anything. You are an area guardian, as well? Sure am. Lord Tokitsu slapped the unknown script inked on his belly. I'm the area guardian of the canteen. Ludmilla glanced at her surroundings. Could it be that she had truly been translated into a divine realm? Was the canteen merely a conceptual metaphor perceived through the lens of her limited comprehension? She might have been taking things too lightly. The Bork that stood across the table from her could very well be a god of cooking. If that is the case, claiming to be an area guardian is too presumptuous by far. I'm just an inexperienced noblewoman relying on unearned power to advance my interests. She certainly didn't make any claims to divinity. If anyone started praying to her, they would be sorely disappointed over how stingy their supposed god was. The potential god of cooking waved a meaty hand in front of her face. You still with us? He said. Forgive me, Lord Tokitsu, Ludmilla said. I look forward to a long and fruitful relationship with you. Lord Tokitsu straightened and let out a boisterous guffaw. That's the spirit. Let's bust out some results that please Lord Ines. I'll be waiting to hear from you. With that, the head chef returned to his kitchen. The silence left in the wake of his loud energy felt especially profound. Where are we going now? Lord Mayor asked. Dunno. Lady Aura said. His Majesty mentioned something about a library, Ludmilla offered. It is probably best for us to wait until Lord Ines returns for that, Miss Alpha said. How about we show Lady Zarodnik to her accommodations in the royal suites? An assuredly idiotic thing sprouted from the depths of Ludmilla's imagination. She tried to shake her head free of the thought, but it stubbornly stuck with her. Just for clarification, Ludmilla asked, what are the royal suites? They are the rooms belonging to the supreme beings, my lady, Miss Alpha answered. Perhaps it's best that I stay on the 6th floor after all, Ludmilla said. I am absolutely unworthy of soiling such divine abodes. Lord Ines has expressed his desire for you to stay in one of the suites, Miss Alpha said. We can hardly refuse his orders, can we? Ludmilla looked to Lord Mayor and Lady Aura for help, but they only looked back at her with blank expressions. She didn't know what that meant, but it couldn't possibly be good. Please follow me, Lady Zaradnik, Miss Alpha said. What was going to happen to her? Ludmilla did her best not to drag her feet as she allowed the maid to lead her back the way they had come. Surely, she would be struck down for blasphemy. Was it some sort of test? If so, what is the correct answer? To follow orders even if I know they're wrong, or refuse them? Sir Sana was the god of judgment and justice, so he would surely hate it if she went along with everything simply because they were his orders. Or was she looking at it the wrong way? Did the god of justice define what was just? They re-entered the foyer and turned to ascend the sweeping central staircase. Ludmilla swallowed as she stared at the crimson carpet along their path. And, then, she remembered something. Wait, Ludmilla said. They were envious of me. It was a year previous, but she still remembered it clearly. Lady Shiltia's handmaidens envied her ability to serve the Sorcerer King by questioning his decisions. I shouldn't do this, Ludmilla told Miss Alpha. I have no right to stay in a suite meant for supreme beings. A tent on the 6th floor is good enough for me. But Lord Iron said, I am not ungrateful for His Majesty's hospitality, Ludmilla said. But it is simply too much. To be able to see the great tomb of Nazarick with my own eyes is blessing enough. A serene smile lit up Miss Alpha's face, and then she reached out to take Ludmilla by the wrist. Her hand phased through. Ludmilla turned and bolted. Stunning fist. Something heavy thumped into the small of her back, but she kept running. Wah. She has a freedom effect, Yuri, Lady Aura said. Miss Alpha is trying to restrain me. Had she answered wrongly? No, there wasn't any time to think. Ludmilla activated Wind Stride and sped towards the teleportation gate. Miss Alpha flashed into existence in front of her. Do not resist, Lady Zaradnik. My apologies, Ludmilla swerved past Miss Alpha, but I do not know how to disable personal effects yet. The maid's arm phased through her midriff. Ludmilla made it the last few meters to the gate. Nothing happened. Not this again. She turned around to find Miss Alpha moving in to corner her with arms spread wide. I thought you said that this teleportation gate is set to send travelers to the 6th floor, Miss Alpha. My little sister is quite adept at managing the gate network, Miss Alpha replied. Along the corridors extending from the foyer, a few curious faces looked in from their respective rooms. What's going on? Is that big sis Yuri? She's fighting someone? An intruder. How did an intruder get down here? Punch her head off, big sis Yuri. Ludmilla glanced in the direction of the last voice. They would have words if she ever figured out who it was. A vast darkness appeared between Ludmilla and Miss Alpha. Ludmilla's legs went weak and she sank to her knees. What's going on here? Is there a defense alert? Miss Alpha lowered her fists and folded her hands in front of her. Lord Ines, she lowered her head, apologies for my rudeness. Lady Zaradnik just attempted to flee, again? Ludmilla winced at the Sorcerer King's reply. It wasn't the best of impressions to leave. She didn't want to stay in the royal suites, Lady Aura said. But it's what Lord Ines wanted, so. How strange, the Sorcerer King said. She didn't show any aversion to the royal suites the last time she was here. A chorus of whispers rose in the wake of His Majesty's remark. Even Lady Aura and Lord Mayor frowned, tilting their heads as they regarded her. I wasn't aware that Lady Zaradnik had visited Nazarick before, Lord Ines, Miss Alpha said. It was a brief visit, the Sorcerer King replied. We just dropped in for a few minutes to take care of something, so there wasn't any need for a formal reception. The Sorcerer King looked over his shoulder. Ludmilla rose on unsteady legs. Having His Majesty appear right in front of her without warning was still too much to take in all at once. I didn't know where I was back then, Your Majesty, Ludmilla said. Still, I think it would be better for me to reside on the 6th floor. Besides, the ranger part of me still prefers sleeping outdoors. Is that so? Well, if that's what you want. Aura. Mayor. Be sure to be good hosts. Yes, Lord Ines. Ludmilla breathed an internal sigh of relief. It appeared that she had managed to get through her trial unscathed.